everyone, and welcome to Mercurial Gems. We're your gems.
Hello. I'm V.
I'm Jen.
And today we are going to get into the power of using our voice.
It felt very appropriate. Not only are we're in Gemini season, it's about to be our birthdays while we're recording this. But we're also going into Pride Month.
Yeah.
Which feels more important for the year of 2025 than ever before.
Yes. If you are not up to date in queer news, we are having so much anti-trans, anti-queer legislation. We have legislation that's being taken back 60 years. So it is more important now than ever for us to come together and help everybody, not only the queer community, but all marginalized voices. Everyone is under attack. So that is where the inspiration of today's theme is coming from. And we are going to fixate on pride a little bit, but I just wanted to throw that in here in the very beginning that it is all more marginalized communities, not just the queer community. But I do think the queer community does have so many other marginalized voices in it that it becomes a little bit of a melting pot. So holding space for that.
Yeah, thank you for that little preface. We're both on the healing journey. We are both very spiritual. So a lot of what we combine when we go into these deeper topics is looking at different lenses of what has helped us on our personal journey. So I thought a good starting point would actually be talking about our actual energetic center that is our throat. There is so many with this blocked when I do Reiki on people and I do energy work and I tune into people's auras. This is one of the top spots that is blocked. And I had more work to do around my voice and my throat chakra when I started into spirituality, that this is really very common and very potent work to do. So I'll share a little bit more about it. So what I tell a lot of my clients is I see the throat as being the link between your head and your heart. Yeah. Because you have all this energy up here. You can learn to unpack and invite in love, which I feel like is a part of the journey that kind of finds you. But in order to link what's coming from your heart and your head, you have to create the vibration of the energy center that is your voice. And a lot of times we don't want to talk. We think that we can just kind of think it through, push it off to the side, keep things light in conversation, or we stick to talking about only what we're comfortable with and not what we're uncomfortable with. And then we don't realize that over time, this center is just getting smaller and smaller and can be so blocked up that when I started going to talk, it was so funny when I started leading retreats and doing more workshops. I was finding pictures with my hand right here, literally protecting it, a wound.
That's crazy.
I would be talking to people like this, I'm choking, which is.
Did you feel like your windpipe was smaller while you were talking?
This was completely subconscious. And it's so casual to be talking to people like this, and I was literally catching myself, that's how vulnerable it felt that I was physically covering it. And then I would go to do talks where I'd be a little more aware of where I'm putting my hands, and this would just get red. There was just blocked energy there. And I think I had to do a lot of work to get through the anxiety and the discomfort that came. I had to keep showing up and using my voice. I would teach yoga classes, and it was just so intense to have 50 people staring at me while I'm talking, and I had to just work through a lot of that. But I think for me, chanting, returning to singing, because I had such a wound of even singing out loud, because you think I can't sing because I'm not good at it, or I'm not going to be a famous singer, so what's the point in singing? And you just cut it all off. And so all of that was affecting.
That sounded very Cleo of you.
It was.
You see all of my silly singing all the time.
Yeah. It was all triggering. I just felt so uncomfortable with every bit of that self-expression.
I really love your link, from your heart to your knowing, being able to alchemize that with your voice, is such a, like key factor. I obviously have recently started my Reiki journey, and every time I've done any session, I do see like on the going up, I always start, you know, just checking in with each chakra, and like I really do see it in the beginning split up between like your crown and your heart, and then solar plexus to root, and then on the way up it all like comes back together. So it's so funny that like that's how you kicked off. For me, while you were talking about the vulnerability of your voice, so when I was younger, I lived in a household where I'm a very inquisitive soul. I have lots of questions, you know. And so for me, I would get in trouble so much because I was living in a very Scorpio household where no one wanted to be exposed, and my questions are very, very exposing. So
we're Geminis. We're curious.
I'm gonna ask the question. I just want to know. Like, I'm not trying to shade you. I'm just 6. I used to get strep throat all of the time growing up because I stopped asking questions. I've been thinking about this a lot lately too, so I love that this is part of the topic today. Is I got strep throat. It was probably the number one thing I got sick with all the time, but they never removed my tonsils. My tonsils were never bad enough to remove, but normally back in the day, if you would get strep throat more than like 3 times in a year, you were supposed to get your tonsils removed, but there was some kind of anomaly with mine where they didn't recommend that.
It was energetic.
It was energetic because honestly, since I honestly snapped, it was like a moment of like, I will not suppress my thoughts anymore, and if you can't hang, like you cannot hang with me, like moment in my life. And that was in my like early mid 20s. I cannot remember the last time I actually had a throat problem. Like I used to be that like my throat was always what I would come down with a sickness, and it definitely was always an energetic block. Like crazy.
Wild. And such a good thing to point out that as like the same with mine, putting my hands up there, your body physically will show you signs when there is an energy block in your body. And until you slow down enough to witness, like you might be always having a hand at your belly blocking your solar plexus. Like you do things to protect it without even realizing you're doing it. And yeah, as far as unblocking your voice, I think it's so fascinating because our actual voice is vibration. It creates not only reverberations inward, but it's shifting energy out. It is like quite literally output. So it's one of the most fascinating energy centers in our body because it has so much power in just actually creating major sound out of it.
Well, and even when you're like, when you are having a somatic, I don't know what you would call that. It's like yesterday where you're like, oh, can you hum for me? Like even just causing, like using your vocal cords to cause like a humming action can help you regulate your nervous system, even if it's not necessarily like throat chakra centered. If I have a lot of trauma stored in my hips, so I have to hum while we do body care because as soon as anyone touches my hips, I get really like panicky, even though I've worked through so much of that already. And so it's so beautiful to know that like our bodies can cause frequencies that actually help regulate us.
Yeah. And you find out as you learn more about the nervous system and the vagus nerve that one of the biggest links for actually having a balanced nervous system where your stress responses are meant to come on, but the problem is a lot of times for people with high trauma, like, or just really stressful environments, it kicks on and doesn't like to kick off. So you find out that a lot of the ways to regulate is through vocal stuff. Like singing is proven to bring balance into your nervous system. Humming stimulates the vagus nerve and calms down your body. And you learn about sound bowls and all of the elements that create noise and how much it regulates you. And you realize that by telling us from a young age that you're either a good speaker or a bad speaker, you're either a good singer or a bad singer, you get shut down for using your voice. There are certain things you don't say in public. You can only say this. Like, don't say that. That's embarrassing. You get so many rules to your voice from such a young age. I got in trouble for talking all of the time in school.
Were you an in conduct kind of kid?
Oh, absolutely. I got in so much trouble. I spent so much time in the office for talking, and it's just sad because instead of adjusting what is the school system, I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, like, maybe I don't have to conform every single aspect of myself to fit in your system, and instead maybe there should be another system that accommodates, and yet we want everyone to fit into this cookie cutter shape, and then we all have major wounds around the blocks that end up existing from an early age.
Well, and you make a good point too. So for those of us who are like on the spectrum, or just not even autism, just like neurodivergent in general,
which is our high queer population,
a lot of us. And so I think it's really important to note that, like, I can only really truly attest to the autistic community here that we take things for face value. So, like, I get in trouble for talking, I have to act a certain way in public or whatever, right? Like, I can learn to conform to that because I got in trouble that one time, and I don't really want to get in trouble again because I have, like, that teacher's pet in me. Jen does not. For me, like, when I would learn those rules, like, it then became, like, to detriment, where, like, I would know that, like, what you're saying is wrong, and I wouldn't know how to, like, address it without getting in trouble. So then I would just sit in silence. But then, like, the times where I would finally, like, be like, no, that's wrong. Like, everything you say, it was so backed up that when it would finally seep out because you haven't been using your voice, you're so blocked up that one, you know, that last straw that breaks the dam, that is everything that you have been avoiding talking about, like, would just word vomit right out of me, and I would get myself in so much more trouble by holding all of that in and letting it all seep out at once. And then also too, because it's so backed up, I feel like for a really long time, especially from like 17 to probably 24, like, I really think that, like, undeveloped frontal lobe, like, really was working against me, if I'm being honest. Like, I feel like every time I tried to address an issue that in my core I knew I had every right to address, because I had so much pent up unspoken within me, I would lose the plot. And then I would invalidate the point I was trying to make, because I just, like, had too much to say at once, and then it would just, like, confuse the person I'm trying to, like, correct.
Yeah. And that's a very good point to bring up. So there's, like, the internal work we can do to shift blocks that are in our voice. But I think another reason therapy is so helpful, and a big piece of the journey, I think energetic and somatic work on top of therapy is so important. But when you finally get a safe space to have your voice heard, which you can find people, but it's not always guaranteed that we have people in our immediate bubble.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and especially for queer community, a lot of our hometowns were not safe to vocalize stuff. So finding our voice was finding our community, and that happened virtually. But getting therapists and stuff, the point of it is you sometimes won't even know what to talk about. You won't think you have a lot to say, and you have to kind of open that channel first for there to be flooding. And I don't think we necessarily should flood out on our people, you know? So what you're sharing too is, like, when you haven't had a chance to use your voice and all of a sudden you're in a safe enough space, or triggered to the point where it finally just, like, goes out, you're gonna dump out so much emotional stress, like, that has been pent up there. And I think it's really important. This is where I think I had my first, like, major unblocking when I did dynamic meditation with a group of people. It was 50 people, and dynamic, like, shakes you up first. You do, like, a very crazy breath and shake technique, and then you let out in the second phase whatever got stirred up. And I heard, like, the most visceral, like, wild animalistic sounds come out of 50 people all at once. I have never heard sounds like that in my life. My body collapsed onto the ground and started shaking. I, like, was so unfamiliar with just that level of expression, and I've done so many dynamic meditations since that, and it is just so important we practice being messy with our voice. So whether that's in therapy or you just in the car or around safe people, just make the weirdest, craziest sounds. There is something so cathartic with breaking rules of what is okay to like let out and what is not, because like just screaming at the top of your lungs, being able to go to protest and yell
Absolutely.
is so cathartic, and you can literally feel heat and energy just coming out, and it's so therapeutic.
So a couple points just to back exactly what you're saying. If you are at all like in the somatic community, I think we dog on talk therapy a lot, but I think there's also like a moment of like holding space for those of us who have not had safe spaces to let all of that out. Like, talk therapy does actually help to an extent. I don't think people should just solely rely on talk therapy, because I do see that the downside to talk therapy is a lot of the therapists, like, they're there to hold space, they're there to listen, and they can give you some guidance, but they don't give you enough actually like moving on past half the time.
They respect your boundaries.
Yeah. And that's where I think the somatic work comes into play. Like, I think it's just layers of things. But before I even had the privilege of therapy, because I knew probably around 22, I looked at my partner at the time after one of my little autistic meltdowns that I didn't know was an autistic meltdown at the time, and I was like, I need to go to fucking therapy, dude. But it wouldn't be until like almost 6 years later that I even had the opportunity, because like it holding space for the fact that it is a privilege to go to therapy. So what I would do in the meantime is I would try to look up free resources. I'm a big reader, so I have this rotation of how I like to read books. I like to read something that aligns with my spirituality, because I think there's an ever expansive place of knowledge there. I like to read one that is my self-help, like self-care, and that would be more psychological approach. And so that was how I started without therapy. But also too, what Jen was saying about like screaming in your car, I cannot tell you how many times I was so systematically overloaded, and I had this one job that would just like dysregulate the hell out of me. And every day, 5 o'clock on the dot, I'd log out. I'd go get in my car. I was living in Charleston, South Carolina at the time. And if you don't know, Charleston, South Carolina has like arguably the worst traffic. And I know LA exists, but arguably the worst traffic ever. So even though I lived 20 minutes from my house, I would be in 2 hours worth of traffic. And so for those 2 hours, I would play the most like angsty emo songs known to man and just scream at the top of my lungs. And we're all in bumper to bumper traffic, so like no one can hear me. It was so therapeutic. Or even the like arriving at your destination and dissociating for 30 minutes just to like let your brain process some of the day was like so helpful. And I know like it kind of sounds crazy to be like, oh, I just scream in my car. But like, honestly, like even in today's society, even though both of us have had therapy, like we do it at the house all the time. There's just a little bit of a for like a solid 30 seconds, at least 3 times a day.
The work of your vocal expression should never end. And I want to link this back into Pride, because I think probably one of the biggest groups, you know, to have to cater to what is an accepted societal norm, especially other marginalized groups that exist within the queer community. Like, there is just so many tactful games you have to play in what's okay and not okay, that your voice is not getting that true outlet of expression. I think it's beautiful that throughout history, as you study even queer history and all of it, the arts has been like a channel. And instead of being able to play the part in their own life, like a lot of people use theater to be able to be an outlet to still get their voice out. And that was more accepted if they were playing a character, but not if they were playing themselves, which is
vibes
messed up in its own way. But hey, it's therapeutic nonetheless. We're getting the use of our throat. And I think with Pride, like, we are now starting to see more people that were raised with a family that gave them that acceptance from the beginning. But I think for a lot of us, there was just not a safe space at our own home, and there wasn't a safe space in even local community. We are trying every day to make sure that people can just be naturally themselves, and it's not held with so many patterns of shame and having to stay so on to determine, like, oh, can't say that around this person, or I can put myself in literal danger.
Yeah.
Or like, you shouldn't have to think so much just to exist as a person. And the queer community has had to struggle with this so much because there's literal spaces you're not safe.
Especially for the queers in small towns. Jen and I both grew up in Florida. Florida now has like these don't say gay rules and shit. Like, it's really embarrassing, honestly.
One of the bleaker states.
Yeah, we're both gonna like go visit home here for our birthdays, probably like right before you guys are listening to this. And like, there is a part of me that gets really anxious every time Jen and I travel. There is a layer to being queer that is having to like think about before you get out of the car, like, where are we? Is it safe to be us? Should we at least pretend to try and be a little straighter here, which never works. Like, it's so bad. Shout out Idaho for traumatizing me. It's just something that I think most people don't realize, and especially for queer people who have had the acceptance, who maybe haven't had to immerse themselves in the like history of queer culture, and they just see it for what it feels like to some people today who have been met with acceptance and love, which everyone should be met with acceptance and love. But I think it's really important to know what our queer ancestors have fought for us to even have today that feels like such a privilege when it really should just be a basic human right. Mm-hmm. And it's stuff that most people don't have to think about. Like, a straight couple doesn't have to get out of the car and think, like, can I hold my husband's hand? Mm-hmm. And you know, is it safe to show affection to my wife? Like, that's not something. And as someone who dated seemingly straight for 15 years, like, it is something that never crossed my mind of showing affection. But every time I'm with you, I'm like, am I going to put way less myself in danger, or am I going to put you in danger by showing you affection? It's like so sad. But that's why it's so important for us to use our voice. Pride itself started as a riot. And it started as a riot because for years before Stonewall even happened, you did have queers out there protesting. And they protested. We've went through these ebbs and flows through fighting for our rights. It started out as, you know, queers who would come together and try to show the straight community, the cis hetero community, like, look, we can act the way you think is civilized. Like, we can play this part, you know, which is kind of what you were saying a minute ago. Like, it's okay if we play the character, but not if we play ourselves. Like, oh, we can, you know, conform to what feels comfortable for you. Just let me be me. And then as time has gone on, like, that doesn't work the way we want it to work. You know, I wish it could be so simple as to just, like, let us be us and you be you. But where Stonewall occurred is it kept getting more and more violent towards our community, no matter how hard we were trying to show, like, peaceful integration is what the queer community had fought for probably a solid 40 years before Stonewall happened. And Stonewall was a riot because these police officers would come into these queer bars that were already underground. They were already hidden from society. Like, we're out of sight, out of mind, and you're still actively seeking them out. And someone just snapped. They had their moment where they said, I'm done with it. And they threw a brick. Mm-hmm. And that actually wasn't Marsha P. Johnson, for the record. She came later in the night. I feel like that gets a little convoluted, and she's still an icon of Stonewall, but just for the record, she was not the first one to throw a brick.
And they just started taking it outside of the bars and doing it way more loudly and publicly, and I think that's the main point around a lot of the big movements of the gay revolution and coming out is being silenced never actually ended up alchemizing the energy to making space. So taking up space and being loud about something is what inevitably always has led to big change.
You can't keep people in boxes, whatever box that may be.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what happened within some of the bigger queer movements there were people just actually vocalizing their stories. So we read this book, The Gay Revolution. It was incredible.
10 out of 10 recommend.
Yeah, it's on Audible. And the book went into, there were cases where people had been partners for 40 years and one of the partners ends up going to the hospital and there wasn't even enough rights to be able to go and be with your person who was in our medical healthcare system because it was so unjust and biased that you couldn't even be with your person. Insurance companies didn't even have options for queer couples. It blocked everything. And until we brought some of these stories to light in the court system in front of a jury and said, like, my partner had to die without me because I wasn't allowed to go in and be with my person.
Because we weren't married. And so, and then even if their family, like if the partner's family was against their queerness, like the family had more rights to the partner who probably didn't even speak to them.
Yeah, a lot of times didn't. There was multiple big cases like that. Or people not being able to get the rights to support, like after a partner passed away, like the life insurance policies, like things that you just can really take for granted. And until these stories were vocalized and brought to light, which the people that had to take it to the court had to fight so many hurdles and continue to share their story, which is already traumatic, and have to tell it to multiple reporters, review it again, review it again, review it again. They make you exhausted for using your voice when you go to shift something that doesn't match the standard societal visions.
And mind you, like, these were people, like, a lot of cases that Jen just described, like, they had to take those cases to court multiple times, and it wasn't until they would find, like, the exact right perfect case where they could kind of, like, haha, gotcha, to, like, the judges and the jury of, like, okay, but even as a straight person, like, XYZ, and it's just like a very minute detail that they couldn't quite be like, okay, I guess you guys can have that. Like, it was never, absolutely, that makes sense. That's so horrible. The trauma that you went through that you've now had to repeat time and time again. It was always so begrudgingly given.
Yeah.
But it's important that those people stepped up and they used their voice and they spoke out against it. And it's been that loud owning of all of it, good and bad, that has allowed us to get to where we are today. And that same place that our queer ancestors have fought for us to get to today is still under attack, which is insanity at this point.
It's so sad that history is trying to repeat and take us back again. It's just crazy. And I think we can go into this mode of, I want to keep my people safe and I want to just be quiet and take care. But we also have to realize that people lost their lives for gaining us the privilege we even have. And it is, I mean, V and I feel very strongly that it is a big part of our privilege to vocalize the stuff that maybe other people are like truly unsafe to talk about, like seeing our white privilege and straight passing privilege that we have and realizing like how important it is to be able to vocalize things that others may not be able to vocalize.
I don't do well playing in the closet. I always end up in a little bit of a mental bind at the end of it, even if it's for a few hours.
But we also realize that without bringing everything to light and continuing to talk about it, people have the audacity to take things back in a way, and the visibility is more important than ever. So just remembering that in this pride and this landscape right now, like, be so loud and make sure that if you've had to cut people out and boundary people in your life because there hasn't been a safe enough space, like, just keep remembering how beautiful it is that you have made space to own what is all of you, and that you are continuously just voicing what those truths are, because it not only matters energetically, it matters vibrationally, and what it shifts around you. The more free you are, it frees everyone around you, and there is an alchemy process to that. That is like pride has grown so much since it started. And there is a lot happening for the year 2025 to block it, but go to your Pride. Like, look up everything happening within the year for the queer community, even if you're just an ally, because we need numbers and we need loud vocal expression now more than ever so that we can try to beat what is a pattern trying to resurface.
Remember that when you are preemptively silent for your own quote unquote safety, you're actually immediately putting people in more danger than if you would just hold your voice.
Yeah.
Because if we stood together and we all said, no, that's weird.
We have the numbers.
Wow.
For
Yeah.
that.
And we do. It only takes 3.5% of any population to really, truly make an impact and make a change. And if you're listening as a U.S. citizen, that is 12 million of us, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not population-wise. We only need 12 million of us to make an impact that's worth, like, everything, worth lives. Like, and again, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, like, we are specifically talking about Pride in this, but there's so many marginalized communities that are honestly in more danger, I think, in this moment, that also just encompass in the queer community. And so just when you feel tempted to quiet yourself for your own supposed safety, just remember who you're possibly putting in danger when you do. With that being said, though, what are some action steps we can take to help keep our voices loud and keep people safer than silence?
Yeah, so we talked about like the stuff you can do for your own personal voice, and I think the self-care work and the improvement work is all of our responsibility. Have to take care of ourselves to be able to take care of others. But what V and I have found the most helpful as far as making outlets for our voice is, you know, social media is going to have its ebb and flows. I think that can be one channel, but I would really think locally, like, how can I either plug in or connect to groups in some way? And if your area you're in, you go to do research and there is no gathering happening for queer people, you can decide. We started meetups in our area where we utilize our voice and we talk through concepts together so that we could actually find people. Meetups are a really cool app you can use for that.
If you are in the Asheville area, you're always welcome. We have a couple groups, actually. Like, we've only been here two months, but Meetup is a really, really good resource.
Yeah, and then if you do not have a safe space, which some people really do not, I would try to create some spaces virtually or plug in virtually. There's a lot of people that still do Zoom meetups so that you just feel like you have people that are within your community that can help you keep channeling your voice. There is more protesting happening now than ever. There's 2 protesting groups that we check in on. We check on
daily.
Yeah, 5051
is the main one. And then you have Hands Off as well. I'll Google it. I'll see what's in the area. Most protests are going to submit a permit. I kind of look on the government websites and stuff to see what permits have been requested and whatnot. I know the next national protest day is going to be June 14th, and I think there's one on my birthday. So this comes out June 5th. It is on June 6th. But if that seems too soon for you, June 14th, everyone has a call to action to meet in front of your local government buildings with your protest sign, with your voices. And like, if you don't have, we talked about therapy at the beginning of this, if you do not have an outlet for using your voice, let me tell you, the best therapy I have ever had in my life has been chanting at these protests. We just moved from Denver. Denver was way more rowdy, I think, than Asheville, but screaming into a crowd that feels the same kind of unrest that you feel, and you all chanting everything about it is just like, it's not only unblocking your own throat chakra, but it's like harmonizing with the collective and like finding a healthy expression for the anger within for all the injustice that is. And I think that's just something that's so beautiful that you can't really fully conceptualize until you experience it for yourself.
Yeah. So there's some food for thought, some resource ideas. We wish all of you a happy Pride from your Mercurial gems. Big love to all of you, and thank you for listening to one of our episodes. We will see you in the next one.
Bye.